So for this video, I'm going to talk about a topic that is one many new players start asking questions about after they've tried Artifact for a little bit of time. This is the idea that not all lanes are created equal. What I mean by that is that having a strong presence or control of one of the specific lanes will sometimes give you some advantages or disadvantages if you don't have control of said lane. And I also want to mention what this means for the gameplay overall, because you may be surprised to learn that it's not necessarily as big of a deal as you think it is. So bear with my frog voice, I'm still getting over being sick, but let's go ahead and start talking about the different lanes. So the leftmost lane, or lane 1, is often considered by many new players, and kind of rightfully so, to be the important lane. It's very important because it is the first lane that you get to take actions in at each new mana level. And what I mean by mana level is that every time a round begins, the mana on your towers goes up by 1, it goes in increments of 1, and so it is the first time that you'll be able to take actions at mana level 3, mana level 4, mana level 5, and so on and so forth. Why is that important? Well, it's a great place to begin playing your cross-lane cards. So if you have a card like Gank, for example, at mana 4, the first time Gank becomes available, you can use Gank to maybe kill a hero in lane 2 or lane 3 before they ever get the chance to use mana 4, right? Similarly, it works the same way with board-wide cards. So Zeus and his Thunder God's Wrath, for example, if you have initiative in lane 1 and you have the first opportunity to play Thunder God's Wrath, you could potentially kill heroes in that lane or kill heroes in other lanes before they get to utilize their mana turn 7 cards as well. Another reason that having a control of lane 1 can be important is the presence of lane movement cards. So for example, if you have a hero like Bounty Hunter, Bounty Hunter has a chance to get more attack at the start of each action phase. If he gets that bonus in lane 1 and then you use a Blink Dagger or a Relentless Pursuit or some other effect to move him to a lane 2 or a lane 3, he has a chance to get that bonus again when that lane comes up. So movement cards can also be very beneficial. The same thing occurs with like Luna, for example. You can get multiple Eclipse stacks from her passive if she's in lane 1. Start of the action phase, her ability, her passive will trigger, then use a Blink Dagger or again some other movement effect to move her to lane 2 or lane 3. She'll get another trigger which adds another stack to Eclipse. So this is something that you can abuse and get some additional value out of if you have control or a strong presence in lane 1. Again, many new players might think that this is the most important lane, but it's not necessarily always the case, and after we talk about the other 2 lanes, I'm going to talk about why having priority here isn't as big of a deal as it sometimes seems. So lane 3 also has a lot of benefits that you can utilize there as well. This would be the rightmost lane, and believe it or not, there are some cards that end up being better in lane 3 than they would be in lane 1 or even lane 2. These would be cards that kind of culminate from a series of effects. There are heroes like Storm Spirit, for example. Storm Spirit has a passive that every time you play a black card, he increases his attack for the round. So if you're playing cards in lane 1 and playing cards in lane 2, by the time you get to lane 3, he'll have potentially a higher attack as a result. Payday is another good example. Payday is a card that doubles your gold. If you're playing this in lane 3, then hopefully you will have accumulated gold in lane 1 and accumulated gold in lane 2 that you get to take advantage of when you play Payday in lane 3, whereas if you had to play it in lane 1, you will not get the gold from lane 2 and so on and so forth, right? So there can be cards and there can be abilities that can really take advantage of having a presence in lane 3 and having the right heroes in lane 3 to play those cards. Another really big and often like important part of lane 3 is planning for lane 1. So even if you don't have a strong lane 1 presence, if you have a strong lane 3 presence, you can oftentimes choose to pass in that lane and force your opponent to play cards as a result of your strong presence, and then when they do that, they give up initiative for lane 1. So even if they control lane 1, but you have a very strong presence in lane 3 and you pass and they have to do something about it, they'll give up potentially initiative, and then you can use that to punish them in lane 1. So while it's important to try to have a strong presence in lane 1 at times, you can get around it by just being strong in lane 3 and forcing initiative away from them. The important thing with the lanes is it's very, very easy to think of them the way that I'm describing them, as like lane 1, lane 2, lane 3, 1, 2, 3, but it's really more like A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C in an endless string. So even though lane 1 is the first lane that you get to take actions when the mana threshold increases on your tower, having a strong presence in that lane 3, like, or just that slot in the endless string of lanes, if you will, can kind of flip that on its head. So if having a strong lane 3 is important to try to get initiative away from your opponent for lane 1, it goes without saying then having a strong lane 2 can be really important to deny initiative from lane 3 as well. There's this cascading effect. One of the other things I want to mention about lane 2 is that while it is not gonna have the flashy like threshold plays that lane 1 has, and it's not gonna have the flashy culminating effects that lane 3 has, lane 2 is still important because of the win conditions that exist in Artifact. So you win in Artifact if you destroy an ancient, or if you're the first player to destroy 2 towers. Now that's really important wording there. It's the first player. So if I destroy a tower in lane 1 and my opponent also destroys the lane 1 tower, and I'm winning lane 2 and my opponent is winning lane 3, if we're set to finish our respective lanes off on the same turn, I would win because I control lane 2. The minute I destroy that lane 2 tower, the game ends. It doesn't finish the round. So it doesn't matter how big of a lead my opponent has on me in lane 3, if I take lane 1 and lane 2, then that gives me an advantage. So lane 2, while being less flashy, can still be important because of the sequencing of events. Another thing about lane 2 is you'll see some players that will fight extra hard for lane 1. As I talked about at the beginning of the video, lane 1 is really important for getting initiative and using those cross-board effects. People will fight hard for initiative there and sometimes overcommit to it. If they do that, you can sometimes punish them by just getting a reasonable presence in lane 2 with a lot less resources invested to do so, because they'll overcommit thinking lane 1 is far more important than it actually is. It's very easy to snowball lane 2 because if they fight hard for lane 1, they will oftentimes pass initiative so that you start lane 2 with initiative and you can take advantage of that. Win trades, set up shop there a whole lot easier with a lot less resources. Lane 2 can oftentimes be a very easy lane to take if you see people overcommitting. And that is one thing I want to talk about. We'll kind of talk about why the lanes aren't necessarily as important as one might think they are. So when you first start playing the game, you're going to quickly realize, hey, you know, people are making these really sweet plays when they have initiative out of lane 1. Clearly that's important. I need to fight for that. But the truth is that's kind of a trap. Really, in Artifact, the best skill, the best advice that I can give you in terms of like developing a skill is realizing that it is much easier to go with the flow than it is to swim upstream. So if in your lane 1, you get a bad flop, right? Your first hero that lands there has no melee creeps with it. It gets placed right across from like an enemy axe or a bristleback and he gets chewed up. Don't go chasing that lane if you don't have to. You know, if you lose it round 1 and then you also get no melee creeps that are spawning there round 2, don't feel like you have to deploy there and keep fighting for lane 1 just because there's this perceived importance of that lane. Go where your melee creeps are going. Go where your bodies are. Win the lanes that are easiest for you to win. Yes, sometimes lane 1 is great to have, but you know what else is great? Just having a presence on the board. So don't swim upstream. Go with the flow. Make good, solid, logical choices. If you're winning other lanes, just secure those lanes. Play the board. Artifact is very much a game that's about adapting to the situation. Everyone will talk about the RNG. There's so much RNG in this. How can anybody be satisfied with the amount of RNG in this? There's RNG hero placement in the beginning, and there's RNG melee creep spawns. Well, all that variance is there to create challenges for the players to overcome. It's all RNG, sure, but the effects are very minimal if you can recognize the board state and then make smart decisions based on what's happening, right? That's the river. Go with the river. And if you can do that, then yes, the lanes still are important and they matter, and there are certain advantages and disadvantages to them, and a smart player will utilize them when they are available, but do not try to force it if it's not there. That's the best advice I can give. So in short, not all lanes are created equal. Some do things better than others, but that doesn't mean that you have to prioritize them as a result. The core game mechanics are far more important to follow. That's my advice to you. I hope this video helps you kind of highlight some of the differences in the lanes, and then I also hope that you heed my advice and don't overthink it and don't overcommit just because there are some advantages in the lanes. If you made it this far and you've dealt with my frog voice, I really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you next time.